Greetings and salutations, friends. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Surf and Sales podcast. It's Richard Harris, along with my co-host and good friend Scott Leese. And today we are joined by also another good friend of ours, someone we both have gotten to know over the last few years. He's the VP of Revenue at Tiled. So Jake, Reni, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. I'm actually stoked to be doing this with you guys. I've been following the podcast for a bit, and now I'm glad to be a part of it.
Still haven't shown up at the event, though. When are you going to come? When are you going to send a rep?
You know, the sad part is that now that I'm at Tiled, we're based out of San Diego, and our CEO is a big surfer, so I really don't have an excuse.
There you go.
No.
Well done.
Come too. So actually, but on to more serious stuff. You're a VP of Revenue, right? And we've been seeing this revenue role evolve, I would say, the last 3 or 4 years. The Chief Revenue Officer, Head of Revenue, VP of Revenue.
Revenue operations.
Yeah, revenue operations. How do you see the role with a revenue, like a VP of Revenue versus a VP of Sales? What's that kind of mean for you? And we know we're still figuring it out. We all have ideas, but I keep wanting to ask different people because I don't think it's been completely formulated yet.
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, like for me at Tiled, my role, I oversee all of sales efforts and customer success. So when it's all customer-facing efforts for driving not only net new revenue but recurring revenue, right?
Does that include the SDR team?
So, pardon?
Does that include like the SDR team,
Yeah.
lead gen, demand gen?
Yes. So anything customer-facing from first touch with we call them ADRs, to renewals and expansions. So literally any point where revenue is driven into the organization is coming through, or into the company is coming through my org. I don't own marketing. We have an extremely talented leader there, and for a short period of time, I did do some of that, but I've learned that you need very specifically talented people who can do that. And so I'm glad that we have someone running the marketing side of the house.
Do you have?
Can you tell everybody who's listening, what Tiled is and what you do?
Yeah. So sorry, Richard, I think you asked a question too there, but Scott, you asked me what is Tiled and what do we do?
Yeah.
So Tiled, we are a interactive content platform. What does that mean? Well, you think about today's content typically is static with PDFs, PowerPoints, Word docs, right? Technology that's like 30 years old. But we fundamentally believe like people want to interact with their content. We want to choose our own adventure. If you remember those kind of books, like we love those books for a reason. We want to choose our path. We want to engage with content the way we want. I don't want to be forced down a linear path. I want to actually go the way that I actually want to go. And so Tiled allows you to build content that is interactive, that is actually like clickable, like an app.
So your sales efforts, like, are you selling to chief marketing officers and VPs of marketing and things like that? Like, is that your buyer, a marketing department?
Yeah, because the end result of what Tiled does is our platform lets you build micro apps. That's the file standard that we've kind of introduced to the market, is this concept of a micro app. And those who are going to use the micro app, CMO, creative designers, your chief brand officers, and sales. In fact, oftentimes we find ourselves really having to drive consensus amongst all of them.
It's like is it a long sales cycle, and what's like the price point, just to give people context? It sounds like you've got some complexity there. You're saying you got a lot of decision makers who end up getting involved and things like that. What's the cycle like, and the complexity of the sale in your estimation?
So it tends to be fairly complex, and the reason for that is that Tiled requires a design organization to be supportive of it if they're going to be taking on the actual involved, if they're going to buy into this concept of interactive and immersive experiential content. They're the ones who are going to be actually driving the engagement, right? And then sales needs to be involved if they're wanting to create better content for their reps that drive, better conversions because the content is more experiential. So yeah, the challenge is that if you sell the design, if you sell to the marketing, or you sell the sales directly without having the design decision makers and like key stakeholders involved, then they're going to rely on Tile's design services, and we can do that. But I would way rather see one of my customers be self-reliant and self-sufficient. And so, we pull those in. So typically what that means is we see standard enterprise sales cycles. We sell very enterprise. We don't sell below 70 million in revenue at all. Our minimum deal size is 25K. And we're usually cross-functional in our sales cycle. There's multiple decision makers that require us to drive consensus with.
And is it 25K? I assume that's a year.
So we're doing business with big brands like, Adobe, HubSpot, some of the biggest financial firms out there you can think of that we can't mention, but we're roughly doing business on the most part from 200 million plus.
Do you actually have a $25,000 ARR or MRR?
25K is the minimum annual deal size. So
got it.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's low end, but our average deal size tends to be somewhere between 75K to 125.
How big is your team? Just again for context.
Yeah, so my team right now, there's 9 direct reports on my team. As a company, we are 30. I think I was employee number 30, so I think we're 31 right now.
Cool. What are you seeing? How are you guys handling this? It's April 29th, right? How are you guys handling this with your customers or prospects? What are you experiencing, and then how are you communicating with that? Aside from the word empathy, don't give me that word.
I think we're dealing with it similarly to a lot of people. I think we're in parts of is that we're quickly shifting to understand how this impacts our forecast as a business and how this is going to impact our revenue model that we've developed for the year, and like how is this going to affect the way that we potentially go to raise money this year. So I think for us, there's, as a startup, we have unique challenges that maybe other large organizations might not be facing, and that's runway, right? And that's future funding, and then that's also retaining preventing as much customer churn as you could possibly handle right now. So I think as a whole, we're doing really well. The unique thing about what's going on with the pandemic is that a lot of organizations are realizing we have to double down on our digital experiences, right? We have to double down on the way that we deliver content, and we can't be doing the same thing as everyone else. And so Tile tends to play really well with that kind of a strategy. So we've had a lot of unique conversations recently. We've seen a lot of people pivoting towards content that they might not otherwise be thinking about. How can we make this more engaging? It's like employee onboarding or HR assets or top of the funnel type of content. So it's created a unique scenario, but at the same time, we've got customers that are in retail, or like food and beverage, and they got hit hard. They got hit really hard. And so we're trying to figure out ways to be creative with them to not churn, or to support them and provide design services to help them pivot their use cases into areas that will work. So we've had one customer who's a big solar vendor. Their whole business model is door to door. They've got thousands of reps out in the field knocking on your door selling you solar, right? And overnight they had turned into basically like an inside sales organization. And they came to us and asked us hey, how can we use this tool? How can we use Tile to essentially run all of our sales presentations with an inside sales kind of approach to things? And it was phenomenal to see how we helped them pivot their whole go-to-market.
What are some of the? Can you share some of the things that you guys help them put in place? I think that's really interesting. I've had a couple conversations with people who are in outside sales roles and at outside sales kind of orgs that had to do the exact same thing. I'm wondering if you can share some real tangible pieces of advice and some adjustments that folks made.
Yeah, well, like when you're field related, right? Like a lot of field reps are focusing on like they've got one or two pitch decks that they'll use and they won't use anything else, right? And it doesn't matter like how many assets that the marketing team has put together for them. Like they're so used to being in front of the customer and pitching the same PowerPoint presentation or the same PDF, and so like they don't know how to pivot to an online conversation or being able to deliver that same type of experience, through Zoom like this. That same PowerPoint may not work as well because they're having, typically those pitch decks are like really customized, but at the same time, like they're sticking to slides that they've had for years. Now the idea is like, hey, I'm having maybe more conversations, but I'm not able to do as much customization, and I have to also deliver this in a very digital way. So one, like a lot of people positioning or like transitioning their pitch decks or their sales decks to micro apps is pretty phenomenal because they're able to have more conversational type of presentations as opposed to the linear presentations that they might be having face to face. Like when you're face to face, you can easily move through your PowerPoint and not have that experience like kind of degrade. But when you're like on Zoom, right, and I'm the rep trying to pitch you something, go, hold on, let me go to slide like 45, and I go out of my presentation mode, and now there's like 40 slides on the left-hand side, and like not to mention like everything that's in my like appendix, like, right? And then I'm like thinking through, okay, I'm gonna jump over down this, like the moment that happens, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. The whole experience, the whole conversation breaks.
Yeah.
Because that's not how conversations flow. Like conversations aren't linear, right? We're going to go down any different direction today, even here. How do I have control over like which direction we're going to go in a PowerPoint? With a micro app, it's navigable, right? It's clickable. It's literally like a native app. I can go back to a menu bar. I can go back to like some sub nav, and I can say, okay, yeah, you want to talk about this? Let's go there, and I can take you through that flow without breaking down what the experience would be like. Otherwise, through a PowerPoint, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You come from a big organization in Adobe, weren't you at Adobe beforehand?
I was.
How has that adjustment been, going from a behemoth like Adobe down to frontline leading revenue for early stage startup? That's got to be a massive challenge and a big shift in strategy and mindset for you. How's it been? What's been some of the harder parts of the change? Leaving out obviously the state of the world, never mind all that stuff, but just I think there's a lot of people who go back and forth between big company, small company type thing, and you're living that. So talk to us about that a little bit.
Good question. You got to know about me. Like I'm an entrepreneur at heart. Why? Because my dad raised me that way. Like I'm first generation. My dad came to the United States without even speaking English, and like realized he basically had to survive by building his own businesses. And so I grew up coming home from school, going to my dad's office and helping him solder, computer boards, like, and helping him sell LEDs. And so like just being around that has always given me the appetite, like the insatiable desire to like own my own thing or be a part of something like really entrepreneurial. So truly like going to some of the bigger brands was to like build the credibility and to show that, hey, like not only can I be successful at smaller businesses, but I can do this at scale. And I'll tell you the biggest takeaway I had, the interesting thing, like it's not really that different. And what I mean by that is
totally. I've said that so many times before.
What size of company you're at. You all want more leads. You all want more qualified leads, right? You all want to have like a better process. You all want to have a better close rate. You all want to have, shortened sales cycles. Like, so it's not the issue of like the problems are different. It's the solutions at scale are different. How do we solve problems at scale? And the challenges at big organizations is how many people do you actually have to sell them an idea? And by the time you've sold people on the change or the pivot that needs to happen, is it too late for impact and on to the next project?
Yeah.
So
are you enjoying the downward shift and leading a smaller
I'm
group?
loving it.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm loving it. I love being a part of a small thing. I love, like, I've always wanted to be part of a really, hyper growth pre-series A company. So Tiled to me was really that moment when I actually found Tiled as a customer at Adobe. I brought them in to build digital playbooks because my reps weren't using the playbooks that were sitting on their desks. They were just collecting dust, and some reps were actually using them to prop up their monitors. And I needed a better way. So I used Tiled, and then when I saw what Tiled was doing, I was like, man, this is killer. And after about a year and a half of being a customer, I said, let's go, let's do this. And so I joined the team.
I just had this interesting conversation yesterday. I moderated this webinar that was all about playbooks. I just heard you talk about the playbook that's kind of collecting dust and whatnot. First of all, definition of a sales playbook. And then what are the things that need to go in there in order to grow the sales organization and scale it appropriately? And don't give me like a list of 3,000 things. Like, let's say, your kind of top 5 or 6 things, or maybe 10 at the most. Like, these are the things that should go into everybody's sales playbook if you want to build a successful sales organization.
I think a great sales playbook can support a rep, like pre-call, and planning or prepping for a call, in call, like live. So like can help them, guide them in knowing how to pivot or like run an audible in the conversation so they can utilize a resource to help them do that. And then post call, like rethinking, like, what can I have done better? If, a lot of people I think through playbooks as how can we help our reps prep for the conversations, but don't think about how can we support them on a call. And then you see those tools that are meant to help reps live and recommend assets to be utilized while on a call.
How does that get used?
They don't think about preparation. Go ahead.
Yeah. So how does that get used, right? Live in the call, or is it, hey, here's our playbook. We're going to train you, and then we're going to do constant role plays of in the call stuff that are typically in the playbook. But
yeah,
how do you use that? Because I think that's the part where people, I think, struggle the most. And some of it is they hate trying to force role plays, right? At least the older generations do. But how do you actually make sure it's being used? That's the biggest challenge I've seen with playbooks.
That was my problem, right? I had this printout. It was 300 something pages. And how do you expect a rep in the middle of a call, especially now in the world where we like do Zoom calls, to flip through a page and like go through page 222 to like respond to a question in real time, right? And how do they continue to earn credibility in that type of a conversation when they're doing that without like just completely losing trust? And so that's why I knew I had to pivot to something digital that wouldn't require a lot of navigation. I wish I could show you guys my old Adobe playbook. You would flip, like literally
flip through the pages.
Like, no, because it's digital now. That's the case. So what the idea, to answer your question, they would have their Zoom call or their course call up on, outreach call on one screen, and they would have their digital playbook on Tiled on another screen. And it's basically like an online book or catalog that they could go through. And while they were on the call running through the discovery and an obstacle came up, like, well, hey, we're using Google, right? They could click over in the playbook over to the battle card for Google, right? Analytics, and say, well, this is how Google positions, this is how we position. Well, hey, you guys are in retail. Here's some nuggets you need to know about how people utilize, our platform, our tools in retail use cases. And so they could easily, the way it built it, navigate.
How long does it take the rep to be able to, how long does it take the rep to be able to navigate that path right? Because to some extent, you're still having to sort of hold on a second, let me go look that up, right? That multitask place. So are you really also coaching them on, hey, when you see the conversation going here, you need to start thinking ahead? Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you keep that flow from
Yes.
becoming choppy.
So two things there. One, we actually like enlisted a UX design agency to help. So we built it from a UX perspective. With the one feedback I gave to them, like the key thing was, I want a rep to find anything in this playbook of 400 pages in 3 clicks or less. So the first thing was, from a design perspective, we built it so that in 3 clicks or less, the rep could get there quick, right? Because to your point, like, yeah, like, does it really make it any easier? The second piece was we had a 3-week onboarding academy, right? So at the end, the last 2 years I was there, I ran the academy, and as that 3 weeks, that playbook was used to basically like run every part of like the skills and training parts of the academy training. And so we had a 3-day like deep dive workshop where I would fly everyone in either to like Lehigh or to San Jose. And we would, for 3 days straight, just live in that playbook and run workshops and competitions. And so everyone had to like,
give us an
I broke that
example.
playbook down.
Like,
Yeah.
I get that. I love that. But like, is it just massive role plays? Like again, I just want to keep getting more tactical so people can listen to this and go, right? Like, you know, the phrase I just wrote down was, oh, you have to onboard your playbook, right? There's playbook onboarding, right?
Yeah.
Which it sounds like. So, you know, for 3 weeks, people are like, oh my God, well, they're Adobe. They could afford to do that, right? I'm not Adobe, right? I'm Tile. How does Tile do onboarding of my playbook, right? What are some tactical ways you try to do that or did that?
So the most tactical part where they spent most time in the playbook was actually that 3-day period. Okay, guys. So anyone can spend 3 days on anything when it comes to onboarding. And if you're not dedicating a minimum of a week to your team, like, don't even start hiring people. Like, you're not doing them any favors. Like, if you can't properly invest in coaching and onboarding, like, I think you're hiring too soon, or you don't have the right people on your team. So that's something I get really passionate about. But 3 days. So we took those chapters, we broke them down into workshops and mini competitions, and I would break the teams up into different groups, and I'd say, okay, prospecting, here's how we prospect. And I'd go into the section of the playbook that was about all of our pre-call planning tools, our prospecting tools, how we like researched contacts on LinkedIn and Zoom Info and Discover.org, right? And then I would have them come into that training with 3 accounts that their AE gave to them to research, right? And then for that portion of the workshop, I would have them spend like 30 minutes learning the tools and building a list of contacts that were associated with those accounts. Then the next thing was, okay, now that you've got the contacts that you want to go after, let's talk about the quality of those contacts and why. So we break that down. They would earn points based on like the quality of research they did for those contacts. And the next piece right? Like reward, the relevance, reward, and request. And so we would talk about how do you write an email with that format. And then I'd have them now take those 3 contacts or 5 contacts that they have from those accounts, write emails to those people, and then we would break them down. And so like we would work step by step through the playbook on literally from the beginning of what I would do if I came in from the first day and sat down and had to start prospecting. How do I build a list? How do I email? And then how do I have a conversation? And we like over 3 days, we just role played and we literally did it hands on. And then at the end of that 3 days, we did what we call a call blitz. And I would give them a list of numbers of contacts, and I would just let them call, and we'd have a competition to see who could book the most meetings.
That's great. I love that. Richard's got some audio issues on his end a little bit. So the playbook, how much of a priority is it? So you take the job tomorrow as, you know, VP of sales, VP of revenue. Like, how do you prioritize what you start working on first? Is the playbook like the first thing that you work on? Is it that big of a deal to you, or do you wait a little bit?
That's a good question, man. Because if you asked me this a year ago before I joined Tile, I would have said yes. It just
So,
depends.
so what's changed? It sounds like your answer would be a little bit different now.
It depends. Yeah, man. Like, well, the biggest thing I've learned from working at big companies and small companies is the answer is like, well, it depends. Like, what is your sales cycle? What is your complexity of your sales cycle? What like, what's your market, the segment you're selling into? What's the size of your organization? How much support do you have? Like at Tiled, when I joined, I think I had 3 people on the team. There's still, I don't have any sales ops support or sales enablement support. So like, it's me. So if I have free time, I'm helping my guys close deals. I'm like helping build out messaging. I don't have, and the other thing is we're learning because right now at Tile, like there was no data telling us what success or what great looks like when I joined. So my biggest focus, the number one thing I would say, no matter where you are, is make sure you have the data and you understand the data is accurate. And if you don't have accurate data, like implement systems and process to collect proper data to understand actually like what's scalable. So that would be where I'd focus first.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent the entirety of my career really going into environments similar to what you went in at Tiled. And you're right, there is no data when you first get there. So, one of your first tasks is to go collect the data. You just got to start making some things happen and trying things. But I tend to focus on building out the playbook like right away, but understanding that it's a living, breathing entity and it in no way, shape or form is going to be, finalized, right? Like we might throw 50% of this shit out in a couple months based on what we learn. And I just kind of try to always keep iterating out on it. If you were going to go take this same kind of role again one day, 6 years from now, after you guys IPO for $5 billion, right? And you were going to go be a head of revenue again. And Richard and I started a company and we hire you as the head of revenue. What would you do differently than what you've done so far? So for example, I heard you say you don't have like a sales operations or revenue ops type person right now. And I've said, and been on record many times before, I refuse to take a head of sales role unless I have approval to hire a sales ops person as my first hire.
Yeah.
My first hire. So like, I hear you say that you have nobody in that function. You have 30 something people. And I'm like, I already have anxiety thinking like, how the fuck are you doing that? Because I would never do that.
Yeah.
Is that something you would try to do differently, or do you not care about that part and maybe there's something else you would try to do differently?
That's a good question that I'm trying to think about the right way to answer this on a live webinar.
Just keep in mind, this is your job interview. This is your job interview. So we want, when we go start this company, even though you've IPO'd and you've got plenty of FU money, this is an important question you answer right now the right way. So no pressure.
The reality is like, yes, like that should be your first hire. It should be your first hire. And
so you agree with me?
Hell yeah, I agree with you. It's to me, it's logic. Like you need to build your superpowered like team as quickly as possible. If that was my superpower, then no, but it's not my superpower, right? My superpower is like building process and getting like implementing, like set up, like getting the whole, things set up and then actually like implementing and driving things to success. I love to build and I love to break, but I'm not the kind of guy who can build models all day long and like live in spreadsheets and then adjust models. That's just not my skill. I'm learning, but I'll tell you, like right now, that's the number one. I think that's the number one hire every sales leader should have by their side, because like I actually think that we'll get to a point where I think rev ops or sales ops leaders will be invited into board meetings. They'll be.
I already think that they should be. I completely agree with you, 100%.
I think they should be part of the conversations with CEOs. I think I could see a point where like you could potentially even get to a point where like a rev ops leader might even have direct line to like be a peer with the VP of sales. Like I could really see that, because I think the power there is really critical.
So you're 100% with me on the importance of this particular role.
Yeah.
How do you go get that particular role? when is Jake going to get that particular role, and how do you go get, approval to get that particular role?
Well, it was the
I'm not trying to get you in trouble. I'm trying to help you think, think through this. Like, you clearly understand the value of that.
I've had that head count on my board for a year. And it was actually the role that I was hiring. It's an open rec per se. So it's the first role that I'm hiring post pandemic, like when everything kind of settles, right? So we're on a hiring freeze, and that's the first headcount I'm hiring for. It took me some work to like really sell and explain the differences.
Yeah.
Because it's not because I don't have leaders who understand. It's not because I don't have leaders who get it. It's just that sometimes you have to help them see the difference in the value of what a RevOps leader can bring to the table. And it's not something that their finance guy should be doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a way, and at some point in time, Richard, maybe we should do a whole podcast on this, because it's come up like 3 times. It just came up the other day with Kevin Gaither from ZipRecruiter. He kind of looked at me wide-eyed when I told him that, I don't take a job unless that's my first hire and it's like guaranteed, in writing, so to speak. And he was like, well, how the fuck did you, justify that and articulate that and convert that into ROI and all this kind of thing. And, so we were talking offline, and I'm like, dude, a good like head of sales ops is worth like 5 AEs. Right. Yeah. And like, here's why. So
I'm with you. I literally was thinking, I think it was 2 days ago, I thought to myself, next go around, it will be a requirement. And if I ever were to go somewhere else, like it would absolutely be a requirement. Not only that, I would challenge CEOs and founders out there who are hiring now. If you don't see that as an immediate request or an ask from the VP of sales candidate you're looking at, you should really question that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like in the head of sales interview process, if the head of sales doesn't beg, borrow, and steal trying to get a head of sales ops, like, red flag that maybe they're not sure what they're doing, or they're not ready for the role or something like that. Yeah, that's great. That's great. What are some of the like other things that you work on, on the side? Like, I think you've spent some time growing your network and building out, your brand online. And, I seem to feel like you go through fits and spurts where you're like, active and then slow down and whatnot. Is there a strategy there? Is it just like, no?
It's dad life. It's startup life. It's what I can handle. And yeah, like, you're right, man. I love being involved especially in my like local community when it comes to building like a sales community. So I've in the past, I've been president of like the local AAISP chapters, or I was more active as like contributors on Sales Hacker, other content forums. And like, when I have that kind of time, man, that's the first thing I'll dedicate it to. But right now, every bit of energy I have goes into Tiled and my family. So this is a season of my life that's a little bit slower as far as like my engagements outside of work and like my contributions to like the sales community, because if I got extra time, bro, like, I'm sitting down building out models, or I'm sitting down like building out pitch decks, or I'm working on messaging, or I'm helping a rep on a deal. Just don't have the time like I used to, but yeah. I love it. I love both. It's just that I'm going to get this to a point where I can free up time to go do this.
And then, do you think ultimately, like, what's next for you is building your own company? I mean, you talked about having that kind of entrepreneurial spirit and blood, dating back to your dad coming to the country and starting his own, company and whatnot. Like, is that part of your journey, you think? It
used to be.
Is that where you're headed next? You taking that? It used to be. That was before you had kids?
No, I mean, like, as of even like maybe a couple of years ago, I was like, that was for sure what I was going to do. And my vision for joining an early stage startup was that, I want to get as dirty and as early as I can, so that I can understand all the challenges, so that, I can go do this myself. I think that's evolved, and maybe it's the different stage I am in my life, but like, time to me is critical, and I'm realizing I can't buy that back. I can't invest time as I can like money, and I can't earn this time back with my kids. And so I don't know if I want to do that at this stage in my life. I think the next thing that I would likely do, and honestly, what's grabbing my attention the most right now, like if Tiled were to have, when Tiled has an awesome exit in the next couple of years, I would probably entertain the idea of actually joining like some sort of a VC group and wanting to help them build a center of excellence. Because the biggest thing I've learned from this whole experience is that a lot of VCs don't actually know how to support their portfolio companies. They don't know how to support their portcos. Luckily we have some awesome VCs who spend a lot of time with us. But when it comes to like, hey, here are resources that we need as an early stage startup, and we need maybe some time with these types of like, I think if VCs could actually build center of excellences for their portcos,
what would you tell them to do if we had 100 different venture firms on the line listening to this right now, and they were all on pins and needles waiting to hear Jake deliver his advice and knowledge? Like, what would you have these VCs and investors do? You want them to be more accessible, to help out their portfolio companies more, but like how? Like what specifically?
I would tell them to build out like basically like a mini accelerator in a sense, or like a mini academy like I had at Adobe, where bring in someone who can help your portco heads of sales build out their process and framework and understand what models matter. I would actually hire a RevOps person to be like my co-pilot on that, and just go in and dig into their businesses and understand where the gaps are and help them figure it out. Because I think a lot of startups are afraid of actually asking their VCs for help, but they want to. They just don't want to expose their weaknesses.
They don't want
right?
to seem incompetent or at risk to fail or whatnot. Yeah.
But on the flip side, a lot of VCs want to help. They just they don't know often where to help. And so I think the idea here is you build out a center of excellence with a RevOps leader, a sales leader, and a marketing leader who can go in and basically be your internal consultancy.
And that internal consultant, then you loan them out to the different portfolio companies and whatnot, and they cycle through and spend time there.
I've been a part.
What do you think, Richard?
Yeah, no, I'm having really bad audio. But I've been a part of organizations where that's what the VC did, and those are the ones that I think excel. And I think to an extent, it's kind of, I've yet to ever be in a VC pitch meeting, but Richard's ego would say, how do you help me build the revenue side of this? I'm an engineer, came up with this great product, this great design. We've proven product market fit. We've got early customers. You're ready to give me money. How are you going to help me double down on that money, right? What is your revenue operations like to support me? And I'd be curious to see if anybody, one, has the courage to ask that question, and then whether or not it would either turn off or turn on the VC.
I think we're losing you, Richard.
So
I think we're losing, but I think I understand what he's saying. What do you think he's getting at?
Richard, you're cutting out pretty heavy. He was kind of talking about like what.
You just went on mute too, Scott. You muted yourself. Welcome to the beauties of working from home, guys. Like this is the real world.
Am I on mute? It didn't say I was on mute.
Very good now. I hear you, man. Loud and clear.
Weird. I think that Richard was trying to say that if his ego, if he was in the room with these VCs, he'd say, okay, well, you have this, internal sales resource and this internal revenue resource, but like, what are they actually going to do for me? Like, what would you have them do? Is it just advice, or are they doing anything tactical? Are they writing things? Are they building things? Are they coaching? Like, how in the weeds would that resource need to be in order to add value?
Yeah.
I think that's what he was getting at.
And I would agree. Look, I don't know if I have the right to have an opinion on this, because I've never been the guy pitching a vision to raise, early seed money. But I'll tell you that I would probably do something similar, Richard. If that was me and I was in that position, I would absolutely, this is two-way street. I would never take dumb money. I would never want to take money from an investor just because it's what I need at the moment. I think.
Well, you don't want to raise money when you need to, right? You always want to be raising money when you don't really need to.
And so it's easy to theorize on how I would do this, but I'll tell you, I think I would really, really stick to my guns on the fact that I would want to make sure that this group would really back me and my organization with tactical resources and support. Because if anyone should have data, it's them.
Yeah.
Right. Anyone knows what awesome looks like, it's them. And they have incredible analyst resources, but how can you repurpose that towards actually digging into the business?
Well, those analyst resources are often not super helpful at an early stage company because, like we were talking about before, we don't have any fucking data yet.
Yeah.
So I don't even, what are you going to analyze? I've made 13 calls so far, right? I need somebody to help me craft the messaging, somebody to help me craft the pitch, somebody to help me figure out, some kind of demand gen efforts and what channels might work and what pricing works. And, a lot of people who go into a new sales role, I don't know if this was your experience, but they get tasked to come up with the contract, right? Have you ever tried to write a sales contract before and get it into any kind of reasonable form that a lawyer won't just completely laugh you out of the building?
Right.
Good Lord. I can remember the first time I tried to do that, and I felt like the biggest, fraud of all time. And I just kept saying, why am I trying to build out this contract? There's got to be some sort of resource here who can help me, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure, VC companies have thousands of those, right? You could get in and help us with the template and that kind of thing. So it's interesting concept.
I think,
obviously,
the way that you think about it,
who's built sales orgs like you, would be good in that kind of role.
I think the way they need to think about it is it's their insurance policy on their investment, right? We're going to invest in you, but that's not enough. Here's an insurance policy to make sure that that investment actually doesn't get lost, right? That you have all the resources you need to be able to build a successful business.
Yeah.
And the rest is up to you, right?
Yeah. Well, thanks for spending time with us, man. As you said, modern technology, modern selling, modern dad life, all this kind of stuff going on. And, we got some bad audio a little bit on Richard's end. Hopefully the recording comes out okay. I hear you well for the whole episode. What can we do to help you, man? Is there anything that you're working on right now and could use some support on or some advice on or anything like that? Or just how can we be useful to you and what you're trying to do?
I think in the vein of the conversation we've been having, I think the more that we could provide open source resources to communities, and to our peers and others to help them accomplish these things, I think, great guys like you that run consultancies, and I understand that's how you make your business. But if there are ways that you can actually produce real tactical, open source tools that hey, if you haven't built a bottoms up model for the first time in your life, here's a great template to use, right? You're not going to lose business over stuff like that. You probably would gain it.
Yeah.
So the more you can share these types of resources with the startup community to help them get things right, they're naturally going to need help to continue to tweak and scale it, and they're going to eventually come back to guys like you.
I agree completely. I think that sales leaders for far too long have been overly protective of their secret sauce and what have you. So I have no problem, sharing tips and tricks and whatnot. And in fact, I have a private coaching client who is in Austin, who is a direct competitor of mine. And, I'm not worried about sharing my secrets, and wish this person well. So I'm all about that. And, maybe I'll try to begin that endeavor, and as I try to help you get this revenue ops support that you so desperately need.
Man, yeah, I think it's time for a mindset of abundance in this world, like with the way we do things in sales. And there's enough to eat. So let's help each other, man. That's the way I think about it.
Love it. Well, good hanging out with you, man. Always nice chatting with you, and wishing you the best of luck over there, and stay in touch and let us know, when and if you need something from us. We'd be happy to help you out.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right, Jake.
Thanks, Jake.
Please. You want to debrief?